When the pumps died, the ocean started talking. That's how I always begin when people ask me what happened that night. I don't bother dressing it up. No one believes the details anyway, but they never forget that line, because it's true. If you've worked the Gulf rigs long enough, you know machines have voices. Diesel roars, hydraulics hiss, pipes groan. But that night, the manifold hummed a tune I recognized from a hurricane 15 years ago. A rescue code banged into stop signs and pilings with hammers when phones were down and kids were missing. And somehow, the ocean was the one humming it back. My name's Jamie Brooks, 34, ex-Navy diver, Plaquemines Parish born and raised. These days I do contract inspection dives for whoever's paying enough to forget my knees are shot. That week, it was Bishop 9, an old manifold node south of Grand Isle, a steel spider planted in the seafloor, feeding a web of pipes stretching east into the rigs and west toward refineries. It was August, storm season, but the weather looked good topside. The support barge was steady, the Gulf rolling gentle, diesel generators singing like locusts. Below, whole different story. You don't see sunlight 80 feet down except as a pale green bruise overhead. You carry your own light. You carry your own breath. You carry faith you'll surface when your job's done. That night it was me, Torres, and Malik, my dive team for the week. 3 bodies sharing one umbilical of duty and debt. Torres was younger than me, mid-20s, a joker with a New Mexico drawl. He kept his helmet plastered with cartoon stickers his daughter mailed him, made him look like a soda machine at the bottom of the ocean. Malik, opposite. Quiet, serious, ex-pipefitter turned diver when the refinery cutbacks came. His wife called him our oak tree. He never wasted words, but when he spoke, you listened. Reddick was topside tender, running comms. Former Coast Guard, coffee-stained voice, the kind of man who thought sarcasm was leadership. He never let a chance slip to remind me I was older, slower, maybe not worth the paycheck. I let him. Guys like Reddick bark to hide they are scared of silence. I dropped in first. The Gulf closed over my head like a coffin lid. Bubbles spiraled up past my ears, vanishing into a ceiling I couldn't see. My flashlight sliced a cone through drifting silt, each particle a falling star in reverse. The tether line tugged at my harness. The manifold loomed ahead, legs like a bomber's landing gear buried in sand. Barnacles crusted the welds. A plaque stamped Henderson Marine Fab 1982 winked beneath my light. That company went bankrupt before Torres was born. Offshore doesn't forget, it just rusts slower. I checked gauges. Bishop 9 manifold sided. Barnacle growth moderate, silt depth 2 inches. Vibration baseline about 5 to 7 hertz. Reddick crackled back in my ear. Copy that, Grandma, don't forget your walker. Torres laughed, Malik didn't. That's when I heard it. A hum deep in the ribs, not ears. At first I thought it was crossflow vibration, vortex shedding around a leg, but machines don't sing in patterns. This did. 3 long pulses, 1 short, 2 long. My chest tightened. My heart wanted to answer, because I knew that rhythm. Back in '05, when Katrina drowned our parish, we used it to call survivors. No phones, no radios, just a hammer and a piling. 312 meant where are you? Answer if alive. We carved it into stop signs. We banged it on metal roofs. Kids taught it to each other like a prayer. I hadn't heard it since I was 19, standing on a roof that smelled of diesel and rot, waiting for my brother to come back with water. Now, 15 years later, Bishop 9 manifold hummed it through my chest. Brooks, status. Reddick snapped. I swallowed hard. Baseline weird, manifolds vibrating irregular. Define irregular. Patterned, I said. Not random, 3 long, 1 short, 2 long. Static hissed. Reddick snorted, it's metal, not Morse code, keep working. Torres nudged me, light bobbing in the murk. Sounds like your fight song, huh? I shook my head, voice flat. Not a fight song. But I didn't tell them what it was. Some things you don't hand over until you're sure they won't laugh. We swam to the habitat, a steel capsule bolted to the seabed, 4 meters across, 3 high. A trick of physics keeps air trapped inside so you can surface in a bubble of stale metallic breath. Ugly thing, but it's life. The pipe's mouth jutted up through a pool in the center, sealed by a massive rubber plug. The depressurizer, a rattling machine the size of a dorm fridge, sat ready to bleed it down. We climbed onto the narrow ledge circling the pool, masks up, helmets off. The air reeked of oil and damp steel. Condensation dripped from the ceiling like a leaky church roof. By the book, Malik said, crouching by the depressurizer. His voice was always calm, like a mechanic reading scripture. By the book, Torres echoed, already fumbling with the black hose. I nodded. By the book. We said it because procedure was the only prayer we trusted. Torres snapped the hose to the plug valve. Malik checked the seals with those careful pianist's fingers of his. I ran the numbers in my head, volume, pressure, differential. Ready, Torres said. Confirm, Malik said. 3, 2, 1, I called. The valve cracked. The machine woke with a smoker's rattle, then steadied into a low breathing sound. The plug flexed inward, rubber bowing like a lung. The air in the habitat pressed against our cheeks, ready to bolt. That's when the hum came again, 3 long, 1 short, 2 long, and my chest answered without permission. The water line trembled. The plug shivered like it had a heartbeat. The depressurizer's pitch drifted upward. Wrong direction. Pressure equalization wasn't bleeding off, it was reversing. Shut it, I snapped. Torres twisted the valve. It is shut. The machine screamed, the plug buckled, and then the habitat's air, our precious thin bubble of life, tore out through the pipe in a white hurricane roar. Steel groaned like an old ship breaking its spine. Water surged in. My helmet slammed the wall. Pain detonated in my shoulder. I grabbed for Torres, caught his glove, and the pipe ate us both. Imagine being shoved headfirst through a steel throat slicked with oil and seawater. Every bend is a fist, every seam a blade. Your body isn't yours anymore, just meat dragged by a current older than language. I tried to scream but swallowed foam. My ribs hit metal, my knees cracked against welds, my vision burst white. Then impossibly my face broke the surface of a pocket. Air, sharp, oily, metallic, but air. I coughed until bile rose. I pressed my forehead to freezing steel and sobbed between breaths. Torres, I croaked. Silence, then faint, ragged. Ox, alive. Malik, I screamed, a groan, then words thin as thread. Here, think my legs. Static swallowed the rest. We weren't dead, not yet. I forced my breathing steady. Listen, we move forward, crawl, air pockets ahead maybe, we don't stop. Copy, Torres whispered. Not sure Malik began. We go forward, I said. Don't wait for me. My hand brushed something wedged in the pipe elbow. Cold metal barnacled. I fumbled until it came free, an old aluminum dive tank, straps rotted but intact. I twisted it in my hands, beam scraping the surface. Letters gouged deep into the shell glared back at me in my own light. Don't wait for me. Not neat, not even straight, but the letters were mine. My hooked J, my hard-pressed T. The way nuns used to scold me for carving too deep into paper. My own handwriting. My throat locked. Salt burned my eyes. Jamie, Torres asked, what is it? I turned the tank so they could see, but in that oil-black dark maybe I only showed it to myself. "Tank," I whispered, my voice was breaking. "Someone left this here." "What's it say?" Malik asked. I swallowed. "It's my writing," I said. "And it says—" The manifold hummed behind us, the same 312 I'd prayed with on rooftops after Katrina. The letters gleamed back like they'd been waiting for me all along. "Don't wait for me." And that was the moment I realized the ocean wasn't just talking. It was answering. They tell you the machines out here don't care about you. That's how you stay sane. You keep the world small: gauges, clamps, bolts, checklists. Because if the machines start feeling like animals, you begin talking to them, and if you begin talking to them, you will hear answers. We shut the power, something else turned it back on. That's the whole night in one sentence. But since you're listening, here's the rest of it the way it really felt. Skin, bone, breath. I'm still wedged in the elbow of the pipe with oil burning my throat and the tank in my hands. 4 nails on metal words scratched into the shell. "Don't wait for me." Torres floats somewhere ahead in the dark. Malik is behind us, the shape of a man more than the man, voice thin, legs wrong. The hum is still there, 3 long, 1 short, 2 long, walking my ribs like a hand that knows the way. "Jamie," Torres, "say something." "I'm here." The words rasp. My mouth tastes like pen is chewed with rubber. "We're going to kill the pumps. Down here." He tries to make it a joke and fails. "Topside." I fumble for the push to talk, thumb slippery. "Reddick, copy." White noise for a long beat, the kind that makes you feel like distance got bigger. Then "copy." "We need a hard stop on A-line pumps," I say. "Now." "The hell happened to buy the book?" He shoots back. The sarcasm is thinner than it was an hour ago. Fear eats all the fat out of a man's voice. "Your pressure differential." "Reddick," I say, sharp as a dropped wrench. "A4 and A2 off. ESD if you have to, we're in the line." Silence. Then a curse that sounds like it walked in from the Coast Guard days. "Stand by. We don't have a choice." The pipe groans in its bones. The pocket's air thins, water pressing up to kiss my lips. I tilt my head back until my scalp grinds cold metal. Torres bumps my boot. I squeeze his ankle, counting for both of us. In, out, 2, 3, 4. I picture the breakers up there, painted safety colors, big levers nobody touches without a reason you can point to in a manual. I picture Reddick in the control shack, headset crooked, eyes on a bank of screens that always look like they know more than the men reading them. A sound shifts. You learn the difference between sounds out here. Pumps whine, valves bark, seals squeal when you've done them wrong. This is a field-wide groan settling into a silence that feels like the inside of a church. When the air conditioner finally quits, my shoulder unclenches without asking permission. "Power down," Reddick says. He puts a little pride into it, like he pulled Excalibur out of a breaker box. "A2 and A4 are cold. You're welcome." The hum in my chest dies with them. For 3 breaths the ocean is only the ocean. Not a choir, not a machine. Just water pressing from every side, indifferent. "Okay," I say. We crawl. The tank bangs the pipe as I tuck it under my arm. We move the way you move in a dream, where the floor wants you and you don't want it back. Elbows, knees, 1,000 small conversations between pain and metal. My shoulder protests every push. The air pocket breaks over our heads and becomes water. We go under. Hands find seams, toes jam for purchase. Bodies thin themselves to fit through a circle that could never be big enough. We slide into the next pocket, gasping, laughing the kind of laugh that is mostly relief and a little hysteria. I spit oil. Torres coughs so hard it sounds like something tearing. "You good?" I ask. As good as a man can be inside a pipeline at midnight, he says, and sucks another breath like it owes him money. Malik, I call. Present, comes back far away and polite like attendance at a bad meeting. Left legs not part of the team. Keep talking, I tell him. We keep moving. Jamie, Torres says softly, show me what you found. I turn the tank. In our flashlights, the scratches look fresher than they should at the bottom of the sea. He doesn't speak for a long second. Looks like yours, he says finally. He doesn't say it to tease me. He says it like he'd say there's a leak. Coincidence, I say. The word is a life ring I don't want but grab anyway. Rental tank, half the Gulf. I believe you, Torres says. And what I hear is I hear what that does to you. The line shivers. Reddick, I say, confirm lockout on A2 and A4. Locked, he says, tag out complete. I got padlocks on screen and my hand on the phone if anyone topside even dreams of touching them. He pauses and, Brooks, say it. Safety wants a status. I'm patching you through to the room. We don't need more voices, but we also need a helicopter later, and company choppers fly faster for divers who sound professional when scared. A new voice joins, clear, clipped, Houston. Brooks, this is Ed Lowell, duty safety. Understand you experienced a depressurization event at the habitat of Bishop 9. Affirm, I say. We were pulled into the line. 3 divers, 2 mobile, 1 compromised. Do you have visual? Negative. Do you have a bearing? I almost laugh. We have a direction, forward. He doesn't laugh either. We have you on PLC, he says, meaning their programmable logic controller, the little brain that tells big machines to do what they do. You're safe with A2 and A4 cold. We'll hold them down till you're out. I am about to say thank you when something undercuts his confidence like a knife under a belt. The hum starts again. It doesn't re-enter so much as rise right where it left, 3 long, 1 short, 2 long, tapping the back of my sternum with the ghost knuckle of a memory. The water stirs against my cheeks. Reddick, I try to keep the edge out of my voice. Confirm status. Still cold, he says. We'll keep it. A clunk walks down the pipe. A motor whine unfurls like a banner. It's not a lot, it's enough. Who brought up A4? Ed Lowell asks, suddenly not clipped but tight. Nobody, Reddick says, and I hear the hands moving on keyboards through his headset. ESD is engaged, Lowell. I've got red tags. The sound comes anyway. Pumps have ways of telling you they're coming back whether or not the screen likes it. That first throat-clearing spin-up. The little judder as a column of liquid considers getting off its ass. The water shifts direction like the whole field took a breath. A4 is spinning, I say. Don't argue with me, I feel it. Standing by for confirmation, Lowell says the worst sentence on the Gulf. PLC says, Reddick starts, loses his sentence, finds another. We have a start command. Tag out, didn't catch it, that shouldn't be possible. Source, Lowell demands. Reddick is typing like a man trying to make a machine change its mind by hitting it hard. No user, no workstation ID, it came in as system, on a channel that's grayed out. That channel shouldn't be routable, Lowell snaps. Well, it routed, Reddick says, and then catches himself. Sir, the hum crescendos. The air pocket wrinkles into itself. I feel the hair on my arms lift the way it does before lightning flashes in a storm. Pressure is language out here, and the sentence it's writing is move. Brooks, Lowell says with the tone of a man trying to grab a cat by the scruff, we have initiated ESD Group 2. That is a field-wide kill. A4 will remain down. It's up, I say. It's up right now. The pocket vanishes. 1 second I'm talking. The next a fist made of ocean closes on my chest and drags me face first along steel. I don't have the breath to scream. I don't have the breath to do anything but not breathe. The tank slams my ribs. Torres rams into my boots and then past, both of us pinwheeling in a black cough. Underwater horror is hearing your own skull ring. That's the sound I hear when we hit the bend. My helmet bounces. My bad shoulder lights a sky behind my eyelids. I get the mouthpiece in somehow and bite down so hard the rubber squeals. We shoot like bolts rattling down a chute, bodies turned into a lesson in fluid dynamics nobody asked to learn. Then we aren't in the big pipe anymore. We punch sideways through what a draftsman once chose to call a service conduit, the kind of undersized detour you cut when the main run is blocked, or you hate the people who will have to crawl it later. It kinks left, up, left again. Silt breaks into clouds ahead of my light, then eats the light whole, then spits it back. I lose Torres's fins and find them again because he kicks like a man who remembers being a boy running from water with his lungs on fire. Air. There has to be air. There is always a pocket around a kink if you are lucky enough and small enough and fast enough and willing to put your face where steel and breath take turns. We find it. We hit it chest first, both of us gasping like landed trout. The pocket is thin as a rumor and tastes like old paint. I suck it in until I can stand to think. Malik, I choke. Silence, silence, then faint enough to be memory, still with you. How too far, he answers and somehow turns complaint into patience. Keep going. Copy, I say and hate that my voice trembles. The conduit around us complains, a long creak ending in a dull knock that could be expansion, could be a ghost, could be a man in a different pipe hitting ours on purpose. If you asked me right then, I would have told you it sounded like the ocean clearing its throat to say another sentence. Reddick, I say when I trust my breath. Status of a 4. Spinning down, he says. We hard open the breaker. That channel is, he pauses. Lowell. I'm in the room, Lowell says. His voice has traveled a distance in the last 60 seconds. His vowels are not Houston anymore. They are Appalachia where he grew up. We have a start and no finger. We have a log with no pen. Torres scrapes back hair that is plastered to his skull and laughs once, a little too high. So the system's haunted. Not the system, I say. The field. I don't know I'm going to say it until I hear it. The hum comes back as if to agree. Brooks, Lowell says, ignoring our little superstition because he has to. We are powering down Group 2 again and physically locking out in the yard. No remote restarts. You have my word. Words are cheap at depth. Steel is expensive and air costs everything. Even so, I hold on to his like a man gripping a railing in a bad sea. Okay, I say, we keep moving. The pocket is too small to share. I give Torres my breath and go under first, taking the tank because it is mine now whether or not it ever was. The conduit narrows until my ribs squeal across the curve and my knee finds a ridge and decides to be a hinge. Up, left, up again. I hit manufacturing stamps with my fingertips, letters backwards under the skin of the pipe. Henders, 82, a sequence that could be a serial or the tally marks of someone else's prayer. My light catches something ahead, not noise, not water, a texture like rope scabbed to metal. It is rope. Sun-bleached once, then drowned, then planned into place by hands that thought they might come back. I tug, it holds. I pull again and the conduit answers with a complaint that is part groan, part him. Jamie, Torres from behind. He is doing the brave thing where he keeps his voice easy for me. You seeing daylight or just math? Neither. I don't want to say it's a line, but there it is. Someone rigged a pull here. Old, maybe 60-pound test, maybe more. Why? So they wouldn't get lost coming back. We share a breath at the next bubble like kids swapping secrets. I want to tell him I once tied string from a drowned house to the light pole on the street so my little brother could find his way when the water sloshed high enough to take a kid you could carry. I want to tell him that string broke when a boat bumped it, and my brother found his way anyway and died a year later on dry land because not everything out to kill you lives in the water. Instead I say, on me, and dive. The rope leads us into a fattening of the conduit that turns into a room if you squint and convince yourself you are paying too much rent. My light skates across a plate stenciled AUX node in faded yellow. Below it, embossed letters in brass the barnacles didn't eat, azimuth. That word means direction if you're a surveyor and omen if you've been underwater long enough tonight. Reddick, I say. I'm reading a plate, aux node azimuth. Where should that be? Papers shuffle through his headset. If he has a computer, he isn't trusting it. Blueprints say nothing about an azimuth in Bishop 9. Aux node could be a Cold War thing. There's old comms infrastructure scattered through the shelf. Like an acoustic net, I ask. The question comes from the part of my brain that stores things I'd rather not have ready to hand. I was Navy long enough to hear the rumors, blue cables and secret pings the sea used as a wire. Brooks, Lowell says, keep your head on the job. Your job is to get out. Copy, I say, because insubordination gets rescues canceled. The room has a hatch. All rooms underwater have hatches, and all hatches are promises or lies depending which side you're on. This one is rimmed with a rubber gasket and two hand wheels the size of textbooks. It's the color of rotten pumpkins and stamped with a disclaimer about authorized personnel that never met me. Don't, Torres says, reading my shoulders. We're in a box with a box inside it, I say. Sometimes the only way out is through more box. Which manual is that in? He asks. The one written on the wall behind my eyes. He hates that answer and loves me anyway. I love him back by not spinning the wheel yet. We need a chain of air before we make a stupid decision look like a brave one. Reddick, I say, how dead is A4? Dead, he says. He wants it to be true the way a gambler wants a shuffle to fix their life. Breakers are open. I am looking at men with locks on their belts. So who started it? I shouldn't ask, I ask anyway. He breathes into my ear like he's trying to fog up a window to draw a defense. PLC log says system, he says, right after Group 2 shutdown. Lowell steps in fast the way a better man catches a glass when it slides off the counter. We have an incident manager rolling. Focus on egress. Copy, I say. We are following a service conduit into an auxiliary node. If we can pop a lid, we might find a vertical relief. Whatever gets you up, he says. I put my good hand to the wheel. It doesn't want me. The gasket tried to bond the plate to the frame sometime during Reagan. I grunt until my ribs are an argument. It gives a degree, maybe two. Help me, I tell Torres. We lean into it shoulder to shoulder. It turns reluctant, then angry, then a fraction freer. The room groans. Something elsewhere in the field answers like one pipe calling another through their mutual bones. I think of strings between posts in flooded neighborhoods. The last quarter turn fights, then loses. The wheel stops. I put my ear to the hatch the way a child listens to seashells, and for a dumb instant I hear applause. Ready? I say. No, Torres says. Do it anyway. I do. The hatch gives like a stingy door. Water hisses around the seal. A breath of air farts against my faceplate, tasting like coins and old rubber bands. There's a handbreadth of space beyond and more darkness. I take one quick look for reasons I can't hear. Don't see them. Decide I'll go anyway. We're halfway through when the field changes its mind. Pressure drops behind us. You don't see pressure. You feel its absence, like missing weight in your pockets. A pulse walks the pipe. The water backward breathes. Deeper in the network something moved. Not a lot. Enough to make the ocean remember it could run either way. Hold, I shout, voice hitting metal and coming back a new person. Jamie, Torres says. Backflow, I say. Now, he doesn't argue, he rarely does after midnight. We kick. The conduit catches us by the ankles like a mean older brother grabbing you when you try to run. We claw for the hatch we just cracked. It's not far, that's the worst part. Close enough to be a joke, far enough to be a moral lesson. The current wins the first inch, the second, the third. We win a handhold. The tank bangs my ribs in time to my heart. I think if we get through, if we find space, but I don't get to finish the deal because a new voice joins the line. Brooks, Reddick says, you hearing that? Busy, I spit. No, he says, listen. At first it's my breath. That's what it sounds like, my breath returning to me too fast. Then it's my words a half-second late, like a radio relay with a sleepy intern at the switch. We shut the power, my voice says in my ear. We shut the power. The second voice says, just behind, just wrong. Something else turned it back on, I say without meaning to, like my mouth is a jukebox someone bumped with a knee. Something else turned it back on, the second voice repeats, syllable for syllable, tone for tone, almost but not quite. Torres hears it too. Jamie. I hear it, I say. I hear it, the second voice says. The hatch tries to take my knuckles. I wedge the tank between the wheel and the frame, and the metal decides to be kind for once. We spill into the space beyond the door in a tangle of limbs and bad plans. The current rips past like it has an appointment elsewhere. I flip onto my back to breathe. The second voice breathes with me. Reddick, I say, kill that patch, we're getting looped. Not me, he says. He's scared enough to let the words show their legs. I'm muted on everything but Houston. Lowell, I try. It's not us, he says. We're hearing it too. Too, the second voice says, and the way it leans on the word makes every hair on my forearms lift under neoprene. It is my voice, but stripped like someone cleaned it with a solvent that takes off all the human oils and leaves only what a machine needs to make speech. If you told me a whale learned to talk by remixing me, I'd say this is what it would sound like. Who is this? I ask, and hate myself for asking because that always invites an answer. Who is this? The second voice asks, a fraction late. Stop, I say. Stop, it says. What do you want? I ask. The delay stretches longer, like it needs more time to chew those words. When it comes, it isn't a copy, it isn't mine, it's the hum made mouth-shaped. Whose hands move? The current pulses, a little surge like a heartbeat. The room we forced our way into groans. Jamie. Torres whispers. He doesn't have to say don't talk to it because my mother taught me that as a child, and I unlearned a lot, but not that. Behind us, the backflow builds to a push that will pick us up if we let it. Ahead of us, the room opens into a throat I don't trust and a ladder I can't see. Around us, the calm line carries my voice twice, mine and not mine, syllable for syllable, so close your ear, can't tell which one to follow. Whose? Hands. Move, the second voice says again, a breath behind, like a prayer someone is teaching it to say. And that's where part 2 ends, with the machine asking us a question in my own voice, while the ocean decides which way it wants to run. Air pockets are breadcrumbs until they stop. No one told us that in training. They don't print it in the safety manuals or etch it into the bulkhead by the hatch. It's the kind of law you only learn when you're already trapped in the dark, when your body starts bargaining with itself for the next sip of air. Each bubble pocket is a marker, a proof of life, a little whisper that says, "You're still moving. You're still alive." But a breadcrumb trail only comforts you until you realize it was never meant to lead you home. The service conduit was never designed for human passage. It was a throat of steel, slick with brine and oil, meant for flow, not for lungs, not for us. Every pull scraped skin from knuckles. Every kick sent knives of rust grinding against our fins. My left shoulder ached from the impact earlier, and my wrist burned so badly it felt splintered. Still, I kept dragging myself forward. Torres stayed so close I could feel the water from his movements buffet my calves. Malik was further back, slower now, his voice frayed and thinner each time he spoke over comms. We measured distance by breaths, not meters. The first air pocket was a mercy. Small, stale, but enough to cough the ocean out of our throats and draw one sour lungful. The second pocket was bigger, almost roomy. Torres laughed through his regulator, a brittle, panicked sound, but it was laughter. The third barely fit my mouth. The fourth was worse, a bubble no larger than a clenched fist, and after that nothing. You stop counting seconds down there, you count strokes instead, 20, 30, 40. At 50 my chest convulsed and the edges of my vision flickered with sparks. "Pocket," Torres wheezed. "Not yet," I rasped. Behind us Malik groaned. "Slower, please." "We can't," I shot back. "Air won't last if we slow." His reply was silence. I shoved forward harder, forcing my arms to keep moving, for Torres, for Malik, for me. At the next bend my hand slammed into a wall. "What?" Torres hissed. I lifted my light. The conduit bent down instead of straight, then curved again, wrong angles where there shouldn't be any. The codes etched on the steel didn't match the drawings I'd memorized. "This isn't right," I said. "What do you mean?" "The map says east. This turns south. None of this is supposed to exist." Behind us, Malik gave a choking laugh. "Pipes shift when the jinn walk them." I wanted to tell him to shut up, but deep down the words cut. Steel doesn't bend like this, not perfectly, not impossibly. It was like crawling inside a blueprint that someone had redrawn after the ink dried. The breadcrumbs were leading us somewhere else. Another 30 feet. My lungs begged for relief. Then salvation. A bubble, small as a football, clinging to the crook of a seam. I shoved my face into it, scraping my teeth against steel as I sucked stale air. It tasted of paint, metal, something dead. "Go," I coughed, pushing Torres toward it. He took his turn, then Malik, both gasping like drowning men at a fountain. We shared it like beggars, but it wasn't enough. Another push, another blind reach. My hand found something different. Angled, cold, I froze, heart hammering. My light swept up, welded rungs, a ladder, disappearing vertically into the black above. "Rungs," I croaked. "I've got rungs going up." Torres swore behind me, a gasp of relief. Malik muttered something I couldn't make out. I gripped the first rung. Steel bit into my torn fingers. Above wasn't the same kind of dark, it was wider. Waiting. "Upward," I said. "We climb." And then the calm hissed. My own voice came back to me. "Upward," it whispered. "We climb." The second voice, syllable for syllable, and the rungs trembled in my hand as if something above had already started down. If the hatch is sealed, hope is a rumor. That was the truth every diver carried but never spoke aloud. Steel doors meant survival only if they opened. If they didn't, then they were just another kind of coffin. And as I pulled myself up the ladder, rung by rung, my lungs fighting panic with each shallow draw, that truth pressed heavier than the ocean itself. The rungs were slick with rust and salt, narrow as bones, but I climbed anyway. Torres followed close, his breathing ragged, regulator hissing louder than my own heartbeat. Malik muttered prayers below us, the words warped by static and fear. The conduit narrowed as it rose, the walls pressing against my shoulders until every pull scraped my skin raw. My helmet light bobbed, flickering against condensation that dripped like sweat down the steel. Then above I saw it, a hatch, circular, sealed, the lid. I froze, hand against the wheel. The silence pressed in. No distant pumps, no hum of flow, just the echo of our breath. The wheel didn't move under my first shove. It didn't budge on the second. Jamie, Torres croaked. "It's stuck," I hissed. "Help me." We both pressed shoulders against it, twisting, pounding. The metal groaned, but it held. My arms shook with rage and exhaustion. Malik wheezed below. "If it's sealed, we die here." I slammed my fist against the lid once, twice, 3 times, rage hollowing into despair. My knuckles split, blood smearing across the steel. And then 3 knocks came back. From the other side, I froze. Torres gasped. Malik whispered, "Saints preserve us." The wheel turned, slow, groaning but moving. With a hiss, the hatch cracked open, a thin blade of stale light spilling down. A face appeared, a man in safety orange, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Christ," he whispered. "There are still people down here." He hauled the hatch wide, the air tasting like dust and diesel. We crawled out one by one, collapsing on the grated floor of a service chamber I didn't recognize. The safety officer locked the wheel behind us, staring like he'd seen ghosts. "You're not supposed to be here," he said. "They evacuated hours ago." Torres coughed, pulling his helmet loose. "Evacuated? What do you mean?" "After the breach," the officer said. He tapped the logbook clutched to his chest, pages smeared with water and graphite. "Surface ordered full withdrawal. I stayed to close systems. Thought I was the last one left." I stared at him, my pulse thundering in my ears. "But we just came from the habitat, my partners." He flipped open the log, hands trembling. "Your partners." His finger landed on a page. 2 divers pulled from wreckage, died on impact." My chest hollowed. "When?" "Hours ago." The words tore through me colder than the ocean. Torres went pale, his lips shaping silent denial. Malik sat on the grating, rocking, whispering prayers that bled into sobs. And I, my eyes locked on the entry in the logbook. The names, the times, the certainty. My partners had died hours earlier, but I had crawled with them. I had heard them breathing, and their voices still whispered in my comms. I swear they spoke to me. The tape swears I was alone. I'd bet my lungs on what I heard. Torres gasping just behind me, Malik whispering prayers like the rhythm of his heartbeat. Those voices carried me through the pipe. They kept me moving when the air was gone and the black was swallowing me whole. But now, with the logbook open on the grating and the safety officer's pale eyes drilling into me, I couldn't stop shaking. The record said they were gone, hours ago, dead on impact. And when we played back the comms tape, there was only my voice. The officer's workstation was a mess of cables and emergency power packs, but it still hummed. He patched my comm unit into a battered recorder, the reels clicking as they spun. We leaned in, waiting. My voice filled the chamber, ragged, desperate. "Pocket ahead." Silence. Then again my voice. "Not yet, keep moving." No Torres, no Malik, just me talking to myself. I recoiled. "That's not possible." "You heard them too." The officer shook his head. "I only heard you." Tora's empty helmet sat on the floor where I dropped it, water still dripping from the visor. Malik's regulator lay beside it, its mouthpiece torn. My stomach churned. "I'm telling you they were there," I hissed. The tape rolled on, empty of every voice but mine. "Play it again," I demanded. The officer obliged. This time I closed my eyes, straining. Somewhere in the hiss, in the static between my own syllables, something fluttered. Not words, not quite sound, a shadow under the voice. "Pause," I snapped. "Zoom in." He frowned. "Zoom." I pushed him aside, dragging the spectrogram software across the screen. The waveform bloomed into a forest of peaks and valleys, my voice jagged in blue. But beneath it, almost too faint to catch, a second carrier rode the same line. Thin, precise, mirroring. "There," I breathed. "You see it." The officer's face drained of color. "That shouldn't be there." I set a test tone through the comm channel. A simple frequency sweep, nothing more than a mechanical ping. The spectrogram shivered, the carrier moved. Then words, three, clear as a blade dragged across glass. "Whose hands move?" The sound wasn't mine. It wasn't human. It wasn't even on the tape. It was inside the tape, answering the tone as if it had been waiting. The officer staggered back, muttering a prayer. My own hands went numb. I stared at the screen, breath locked in my chest. The carrier line pulsed like a heartbeat, as if listening, as if expecting more. Behind me, the hatch wheel trembled, though no one touched it. The question still burned across the spectrogram, every letter carved into the noise. "Whose hands move?" And in the calm headset layered over my own ragged breaths, I heard the whisper again. "Upward, we climb." Before fiber, they used the water to send orders. That's what the old manuals whispered, the ones that smelled of mildew and salt and were buried under classified stamps. Before satellites ruled the sky, before fiber optic veins threaded the ocean floor, there was only sound. Sound carried farther than light. Sound bent with currents, ducked under storms, wrapped itself around continents. And now, listening to the carrier that had answered me, I realized the ocean still remembered those orders. The safety officer wouldn't look at me. His hands shook as he pulled the logbook closer, like it might shield him. "This isn't in the scope," he muttered. "It shouldn't exist anymore. They dismantled it decades ago." "Dismantled what?" I snapped. He pointed to the screen where the spectrogram still glowed, the hidden carrier pulsing faintly beneath my voice. "The grid." My mouth went dry. I'd heard rumors, fragments of stories traded between deep-sea contractors after too many beers. A control system built in the Cold War. Arrays seeded on the seabed. Acoustic nets that could speak to submarines without wires, without satellites. They'd called it Blue Grid. And here, beneath this drowned site, it was still alive. We tuned the recorder lower, dropping into subaudible frequencies. The speakers barely caught it, a moan like whale song cut with static. "Is that traffic?" Oraz whispered, his face pale in the glow. "Not traffic," I murmured. "Commands." The spectrogram pulsed in repeating intervals, 7 seconds apart, then 13, then 7 again. Patterns too clean to be random, too structured to be natural. The officer leaned forward, voice cracking. "They seeded this field in the 60s. Long-range acoustic control net, code name Blue Grid. It was supposed to reach any sub within 1,000 miles. Supposed to be dead." Torres spat. "Dead things don't answer questions," I said. Because I remembered what it had said just minutes earlier, "whose hands move." I pushed the mic forward. "Try again," I told the officer. He shook his head violently. "No, you don't poke a grave." "Then I will." I sent a single tone, my breath hitching as it carried into the deep. The reply came instantly. The grid screamed through the speakers, louder this time, resolving into 3 layers of sound. Beneath it all, the carrier rode steady, as if it had been waiting for a call. The officer stared at the display, knuckles white. It's not just relaying, it's building context. This net, it's learning from you. The blue grid was never dismantled, it had grown. Fed by decades of silence, storms, and wreckage, it had learned to listen, to mimic, to answer, and now it wanted me. The next pulse hit like a hammer, rattling the chamber. 3 syllables, my ears rang, my chest seized. J. Bird. I froze. That was my childhood hurricane call sign, the one FEMA had assigned me when I was 12, stranded in a flooded parish with a broken radio. I hadn't spoken it aloud in years, but the grid knew. Jesus, Torres whispered. The officer's face collapsed into his hands, and I sat frozen, headset trembling against my skull, as the ocean itself whispered the name I'd buried. They say a widow walks the slick, counting the missing. Every oil field has its stories. Old men whisper them on the rigs during night watch. Young hands laugh nervously when the fog rolls in, and no one dares put them in a report. The ocean takes, and the stories are how we pretend it gives something back. But the one they told here was different. They called her the oil widow, a pale figure drifting across the surface whenever crude bled from a burst pipe. They said she wasn't looking for rescue, she was counting the ones who went down and never came back. And as I sat in the chamber, the logbook on my lap, the calm still whispering phantom syllables, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was counting me too. The safety officer wasn't the only one who'd stayed behind. In the far corner of the chamber, a pair of Cajun deckhands huddled by the emergency stove, their faces carved from smoke and fatigue. When I pressed them, they traded looks, then began to talk. Their words slipped between French and English, heavy with swamp cadence, but the meaning was clear. Widow comes when the sea blackens, one said. Counts the lost, the other added. She walks not on water but through it. At first I thought it was just folklore, bayou ghost stories carried offshore, but the details snapped my stomach into knots. They spoke of a breach 15 years back, a storm, divers trapped below, and a call sign echoing through the pipes. My call sign, J. Bird. The hairs on my arms rose. This isn't possible, I said. You weren't there. One of the men shrugged. We weren't, but she was. The other leaned forward, his eyes glittering in the low light. Your timeline ain't your own, cheer. Widow walks it both ways. She counted yesterday and tomorrow alike. I wanted to scream at them, demand logic, proof, anything. But all I could do was clutch the logbook tighter, my hands trembling. The dates inside didn't add up. My partners dead before I crawled with them. The blue grid calling me by a name from childhood. And now deckhands with a story that mirrored my own life, twisted into myth. It wasn't just that the ocean was talking. It was telling my story back to me. I turned from the deckhands, furious, desperate for air that wasn't heavy with salt and superstition. My eyes fell on the control whiteboard bolted to the chamber wall. Smeared with grease and half-erased safety tallies, it was the kind of thing crews scrawled notes on between shifts. And now, across the middle, fresh words stretched in jagged black marker. Don't wait for me. I staggered back while rising. The letters weren't just familiar, they were mine. Every slant, every crooked loop, every sharp downward stroke. It was my handwriting, and I hadn't touched the pen. Torres whispered, Jamie, you wrote that. No, I croaked, my throat raw. I didn't. But the words stared back at me, undeniable, like a signature from some future version of myself I couldn't remember becoming. The Cajun deckhands crossed themselves. The officer muttered a curse. And in the calm line, faint as a breath pressed against glass, my own voice whispered, "Don't wait for me. Closure is a dive profile with no surface time." That's what they used to say in training when the instructors whispered the dark jokes after lights out. A dive that never comes back up isn't a mission, it's a grave. And yet, standing there in the stale-lit service chamber, staring at the words "Don't wait for me" scrawled in my own hand, I knew I was already on that profile. Surface time was gone. The clock was only counting one way now, down. The safety officer begged us not to re-enter the flooded conduit. The Cajun deckhands shook their heads, muttering about the widow's count already being done. But Torres and I had no choice. If the grid could still speak, if something down there was rewriting logs and scratching messages in my hand, then answers weren't on the surface. They were in the dark. We suited again, the gear heavy and colder this time, as if the suits themselves knew we shouldn't be climbing back in. Malik's helmet still sat on the grating, dripping. I couldn't bring myself to move it. I just whispered, "I'll find you," and slipped back under. The second dive was worse than the first. My body screamed against every inch, lungs raw from bad air, ears aching from pressure shifts. Torres swam silent, his light a pale knife beside me. The conduit swallowed us, and the breadcrumbs of air pockets were gone. No markers, no reprieve, just forward. At the bend where the geometry first went wrong, the steel opened into a chamber I hadn't seen before. The manifold room, but it didn't look like any manifold schematic I'd trained on. The bulkheads were lined with hard hats, dozens of them, wired to overhead struts so they dangled in rows. Whenever the current shifted, they clinked together, hollow plastic ringing like wind chimes. Torres froze beside me, eyes wide in his visor. It was a shrine. The floor was littered with gloves, boots, name patches stripped from coveralls. All waterlogged, all drifting like relics in a reliquary. The manifold itself was festooned with strips of hazard tape tied like ribbons, fluttering in the push of brine. I couldn't breathe. This wasn't a workspace, it was a memorial. Someone or something had dressed it to remember the dead. And the dead, if the logbook was right, included us. Torres whispered through comms, "This room isn't in the as-builts." I wanted to deny it, to point at some misfiled drawing or forgotten retrofit. But I knew he was right. I had studied every schematic of this site, and no such shrine chamber existed. This wasn't maintenance, this was ritual. The hard hats chimed again, gently, as if the widow herself were running her fingers through them, counting. And for a heartbeat, I thought I saw faces staring back at me from inside the helmets. Familiar ones, Malik, Ward, my own reflection. The sound hit us both at once, sharp, mechanical, cutting through the watery chime. System alert. The manifold console flickered to life, green LEDs stabbing through the gloom. Across the screen, red text scrolled. A4 auto start, 60 seconds. Torres cursed, fumbling toward the panel. I could only stare, my hands numb inside my gloves as the helmets above us began to clatter faster, like bells at a funeral. The shrine was waking, and the ocean was about to turn the pumps back on. Sometimes the fastest way is through the lungs of the beast. That was the saying Torres muttered when he saw the system clock hit 0010. A4 was about to roar awake, and we had no time to run back through the crawlspace. The manifold chamber vibrated like a ribcage about to cough. Pipes shuddered, current pressing at our suits. I looked at Torres, panic swimming in his eyes, and I realized he meant it literally. Ride the surge or drown in it. So we braced ourselves and let the ocean inhale us. The pumps thundered and the backflow ripped us forward. My body spun through a screaming torrent, regulator biting into my jaw. The shrine of hard hats blurred into streaks of yellow and white as the water flung us down a tunnel that shouldn't have existed. I lost sight of Torres, my tether slapping loose. It was like being swallowed, dragged into a throat lined with steel and rust. The pipes moaned with ancient pressure, each bend shrieking as if something alive pushed us deeper. And then, suddenly, the current spat me out. I slammed against a bulkhead, my helmet light stabbing across lettering half swallowed by corrosion. Azimuth node. It wasn't on any blueprint. The chamber's edges were riveted steel, the kind of archaic construction I'd only seen in black and white photographs. 1940s style, pre-digital, pre-everything. The hatch wheel screeched as I forced it open, and stale air kissed my faceplate. Somehow, impossibly, the chamber was dry. I dragged myself inside, chest heaving. My light swept across the room and froze. There at the center, bolted to the floor, was a chair, heavy, iron, fitted with restraints on the arms and legs, the leather cracked but intact. The wall opposite bore a brass plate, tarnished but legible under the beam of my light. Vocal interface. I staggered closer, fingers trembling as I traced the plate. This wasn't just a control room. It was a throne. A place where someone decades ago was meant to speak into the ocean. The Cold War manuals had hinted at nodes, experimental relay stations buried in offshore infrastructure where operators interfaced not with switches or buttons but with their voices. The ocean was supposed to obey, but why restraints? Why chain someone down to talk? The seat straps dangled like dead snakes waiting for wrists. I shivered, bile rising in my throat. Behind me, water dripped steadily from the hatch, ticking like a metronome. I forced myself to step closer, my hand brushing the cold metal of the armrest. The comm in my helmet crackled, and for a moment I thought Torres had found me. But no, the voice was my own. "Sit down," it whispered. The restraints shivered, and the brass plate glinted under my light, the words etched like an order across time. Vocal interface. She reads you like bathymetry. The phrase scratched itself across my skull as I stared at the brass plate, vocal interface, still glinting under my beam. Bathymetry, the science of mapping the seafloor. Only this time it wasn't ridges and trenches being charted. It was me. Every breath, every hesitation, every fear. The ocean was measuring me like depth lines on a chart, and it was about to start reading out loud. I don't remember making the choice. One moment I was shaking, feet planted firm, and the next my body was lowering into the chair as though pushed by unseen hands. The restraints clinked against my suit. Cold leather bit my arms. The comms hissed alive. Static shaped itself into cadence, flat, mechanical, almost like sonar. 1, 7, 8, 2, 4 numbers, nothing more, yet they landed like a punch to the chest. My birthday. My throat closed. That's not possible. The node answered, patient, inexorable. 9-5-6-2. The date my brother drowned, the one I never wrote on any form, never said aloud since that day. I tore at the restraints, panic rising, but the voice kept counting. Numbers fell like depth charges into my ears. 0, 6, 2, 4, the hurricane that had taken our parish. 1, 2, 9, 9. The date Torres had yanked me out of a ruptured line years ago when I thought my tether had snapped for good. The chamber was building a map of my life, stringing dates like waypoints. My tragedies pinned like coordinates on the ocean floor. And I realized the blue grid wasn't just listening. It was cataloging. It had me on record down to the moments I refused to speak of. "Stop it!" I screamed, my voice cracking against my regulator. You don't know me." The numbers paused. Then came a new tone, higher, almost mocking, and the words that followed weren't numbers at all. "You only run because you think someone's still chasing you." My blood froze, because that wasn't mine. That wasn't from any report or log. That was what Torres whispered to me once, drunk and half-broken on the deck of an idle rig, a confession we both swore never happened. And now the ocean was saying it back to me. To talk to it, you share breath. That's what the manuals had left out, the line no engineer ever wrote down. You don't just press a mic button, you don't just route comms. To make the ocean answer, you give it something living. And strapped to that chair, regulator hissing, I realized it wasn't just listening to my words. It was listening to my lungs. The restraints had tightened, not enough to break skin, but enough to keep me still. My chest heaved, each inhale rattling through the mask. And every time my exhale hit the chamber, the system twitched. Static, then a note. I froze, it was echoing me. Torres's voice broke in faint over the calm, panicked. "Jamie, don't sync with it." But I couldn't stop. My breath was already part of the circuit, my oxygen trading places with its pulse. Each cycle drew me closer, the carrier tone bending, searching. Until it found me. The air in my tank was thinning, and with it my voice wavered. I tried to shout numbers back, curses, anything, but hypoxia was creeping in. My pitch slipped lower, then higher, erratic, and that was when the lock happened. The spectrogram on the console snapped into symmetry. My failing breath hit the exact frequency the net had been waiting for. The whole chamber shivered, the straps buzzed like tuning forks, and the node spoke clearer than it ever had. Contract accepted. I didn't remember offering anything, but my blood knew I had. In some submerged logic, in some delirium of oxygen debt, I had agreed. My voice rasped. What contract? The system pulsed. My headset filled with a sound like surf pounding inside a coffin, and underneath it unmistakable words. "You dive, we listen. You stay, we remember." It wasn't a command, it was a deal, and I had already signed by breathing. The field groaned alive, all around, through the flooded pipes. Through the shrine of helmets, through the bones of the site itself, I felt it spool, an invisible grid cranking into motion. Lights flickered, panels hummed, the ocean trembled like a taut drumhead. Torres shouted, "Jamie, get out of there." But then another voice cut in, not mine, not Torres's. A third line, clear, steady, threaded into the same circuit, speaking as though from the far end of the abyss. "Jamie, I've been waiting." The hurricane turns the gulf into one long wire. That's how it felt when the storm rolled in overhead. Every wave slammed like static down a power line. Every lightning strike cracked the sea itself into a conductor. Above us, the gulf boiled white. Below, the pipes hummed like tuned strings. The blue grid had been waiting for weather like this. And now it was awake. Torres and I fought our way back through the conduit, walls vibrating under our gloves. Each boom of thunder topside echoed through the steel, translated into groaning harmonics that bent my teeth. But it wasn't random noise. The frequencies were too precise, too regular. The storm wasn't just hitting the ocean. It was feeding it. The blue grid had turned the hurricane into its amplifier. All around us, helmets rattled on their wires, gloves bobbed like drowned relics, hazard tape quivered like antennae. The shrine was no longer just memorial, it was infrastructure, and it was routing something bigger than us. We forced into the manifold chamber, the consoles lit up like a Christmas trawler. Screens I'd never seen alive before were scrolling with command traffic. I recognized the packet patterns, except they weren't maintenance pings or valve toggles. These were grid-scale, power plant relays, substation cutovers. Entire swaths of control signals weren't riding fiber lines anymore. They were moving through seawater, piggybacking on the storm-charged blue grid. I tasted copper on my tongue. The ocean had become a wire, and someone, or something, was sending orders straight through it. I fumbled at my belt, yanking free the last resort. A waterproof detonator linked to the emergency charges laced through the manifold frame. It wasn't designed for people like us. It was designed to stop a blowout, collapse the chamber, and bury whatever lived here. "Jamie, don't," Torres barked. "We don't know what this will do." But I did. If the ocean could carry orders, if the widow's net could map my life in numbers and repeat the dead back to me, then it could spread further. If it wasn't stopped here, it would never be stopped. I raised the detonator. My thumb hovered. "This ends now," I whispered. I squeezed. The light blinked red. Again, harder this time. The click echoed through my glove. Nothing. The detonator's tiny screen pulsed a single line. "Charges offline." My lungs froze. Torres's voice broke, shaking. "Jamie, it knows." And as the shrine around us chimed like a cathedral, I realized he was right. The ocean had already disarmed us. Security shows me walking where I wasn't. Torres shoved the grainy CCTV monitor toward me, his hands trembling. The storm outside still battered the rig. The grid still hummed alive, but all I saw was the playback. A figure in a dive suit, my dive suit, moving down corridor C at 0200 hours. Except I had never been there. I was strapped to the azimuth node's chair at that time, my breath locked in rhythm with the ocean itself. Footage didn't lie, but it couldn't be true. We chased the signal through dripping service halls, our headlamps slicing through condensation. Rust flaked under our boots, puddles rippled where there should have been silence. And always just ahead, faint chalk marks on the wall. At first, a simple slash, then another. Then 4 crossed through with a 5th, the tally of someone marking time. I pressed my glove against the chalk. It smeared white against the neoprene. Not dry, fresh. Torres muttered, "Jamie, you're leaving these." "I'm right here," I snapped, pulse racing. I didn't touch this. But the next corner answered me. The hall bent into a junction, and under the exit sign we saw it, 4 words scrawled in chalk across the metal. "Don't slash, wait slash for slash me." Each word written in block letters I recognized too well. My hand, my spacing, my pressure against the stick. The message that had haunted me since the first dive, repeating itself here topside as though my shadow was rewriting the whole site. And then Torres stiffened, pointing. At the far end of the hall, a figure stood under the flickering light. Dive helmet fogged, shoulders squared, my exact stance, my exact gear. It turned, and in its fist chalk dust rained to the floor. "Jamie," Torres hissed. But the double didn't move toward us. Instead, it stepped to the steel lock on a side door, fingers quick on the old keypad. I ran forward, rage overriding fear. "Stop, who are you?" The visor glinted, catching my own reflection inside it. For one dizzying second, I wasn't sure which one of us was real. The keypad beeped green. With a single motion, the double shoved the door open. Then, calm as sleepwalking, it stepped inside. I lunged, too late, because even as the door closed, I saw its hand flick across the panel, keys pressed in sequence. The bolt slammed shut, and I was left standing in the hall, breath ragged, with me on the other side of the lock. Claustrophobia is a room filling at 1 inch per second. That's what it felt like, slow torture. Not the rush of a wave smashing through steel, not the sudden crush of pressure, but the methodical, almost patient rise of water licking higher and higher against my chest. Each inch stole breath, each ripple pushed me toward panic. The corridor wasn't a hallway anymore. It was a coffin, filling, and the lock behind me was sealed. I pounded the hatch where the double had vanished, but the keypad blinked red, denying me at every try. Behind me the walls groaned. Somewhere above, pumps shifted, and I knew the blue grid was tightening its grip. Torres's voice sputtered through comms. "Jamie, where are you?" "Hall C section's flooding," I gasped, water up to my ribs. Static swallowed his reply. The ocean had claimed even his signal. The light on my helmet caught something half buried in silt at the corridor's bend. A tank. Not modern composite, but steel heavy, its paint chipped into ghostly flakes. An antique, stamped with a date decades gone. Beside it the air shimmered. A pocket no bigger than a prayer. I lunged, lips breaking the surface, sucking down a breath so thin it felt stolen. My helmet scraped ceiling, my shoulders wedged. There was no room to turn back. The only way forward was a crawl, face pressed to steel, water slapping inches below. Each pull of my hand smeared rust into my gloves. My own heartbeat became the pump's rhythm. The tank rolled against me, its valve hissing faintly, though no regulator was attached. It was impossible. Metal this old shouldn't hold anything. Yet it seemed alive, leaking its last breaths into the shrinking pocket, keeping me from drowning by inches. It wasn't salvation. It was mockery. The crawl tightened, ceiling dropping until the space became less a passage than a sarcophagus. I clawed forward, every movement grinding my helmet against rivets. My lungs screamed. And then metal stopped me. My head hit something flat, unyielding. I pressed my light against it. The beam caught brushed steel, slick with condensation, a plate, and when I dragged my glove across it, letters emerged under grime. Not numbers, not codes, just the outline of a hatch, the inner face of one. No wheel, no handle, no way out. I was face to face with the last door, and it was shut. On deck, the wind chimes start ringing, no wind. The evacuation crew had all but cleared, lifeboats groaning in the swell. But those who remained, the last handful of safety officers, Torres among them, froze as the sound drifted across the rig. Chimes. High, delicate notes tinkling across the steel skeleton of the platform, except there was no breeze. The storm had gone still, the gulf holding its breath. The chimes rang anyway. Every helmet wired along the memorial rail swung in perfect rhythm, metal tapping metal, a pattern too deliberate to be random. The blue grid was calling. Torres shouted for the crew to back away, but already their boots carried them forward, eyes glazed as though strings pulled at their spines. The chimes rose in volume, each note aligning into a melody, ancient and relentless, pulling them toward the manifold chamber hatch. "Stop!" Torres barked, grabbing one by the shoulder. The man didn't even blink. He only mouthed words as though carried on the music. "Don't. Wait for me." The same cadence, the same curse, now sung in metal. Torres swore under his breath. He realized the grid wasn't just rerouting power or memory anymore. It was playing them, using the helmets, the gloves, the chimes, tuning human beings like instruments until they marched to its score. And all the notes pointed to one place, the sealed hatch. One officer stumbled, eyes rolled back and began spinning in time with the chime's rhythm. His safety whistle shrieked, but not as distress. It became a flute line, layering into the impossible orchestra. Another officer's boots stomped like percussion. The blue grid wasn't just summoning them, it was orchestrating them. An entire crew turned into a living symphony, Each breath and motion bent into music that lured them to the hatch. Torres fought it, teeth clenched, resisting the pull that made his own fingers twitch like a puppet's. He threw his weight into the wheel, knowing the others would follow whether he liked it or not. Together, entranced hands and unwilling hands spun the hatch wheel. Each clang of metal echoed like a cymbal crash in time with the chime's mad song. Bolts groaned loose. The gasket spat brine. The storm outside roared back to life as if on cue, thunder rolling in time with the final lock. The hatch bucked under pressure, and then, with a shriek of torn metal, the hatch burst outward. A wave surged up through the opening, black water erupting across the deck. The crew staggered, drenched, but the chimes never stopped. They rang louder, furious, triumphant. Torres stumbled back just as a hand punched through the froth. Jamie's hand. Fingers clawing, knuckles bloodied, clutching something small and blinking. The detonator. Still live. Not a kill switch, a place to put it. The detonator pulsed in my palm, water streaming down my visor, the gulf raging all around. The deck crew stared in mute horror, half of them still swaying to the phantom's rhythm, half fighting to break free. For a moment I thought I had brought them the end. But the truth rose like the tide inside me. This was never about ending it. It was about giving it somewhere else to go. Torres shouted, grabbing my arm. "Jamie, blow it. Damn you." I met his eyes through the spray and he froze, because he saw it too. The detonator wasn't wired to destroy. The charges had been dead all along. It wasn't a bomb. It was a channel, a circuit waiting for a destination. And the blue grid, the widow, the phantom that had been breathing with me, it was leaning forward, pressing closer, ready to ride any current I gave it. I staggered toward the open hatch, dragging cables behind me, my lungs burning with the memory of that coffin crawl. In the chaos of alarms and thunder, I tore free a junction box, jammed the detonator into its port, and crossed the line. The grid shrieked through every helmet, every pipe, every bolt of steel. 1,000 voices howled at once. The shrine rattled like a cathedral ready to collapse. Then, silence. The detonator's light shifted green. The phantom had taken the bait. I had rerouted it, forced its endless hunger into a closed sacrificial loop, a circuit sealed inside itself. Like a serpent swallowing its tail, it spun in silence, feeding only on itself. The blue grid went quiet. The chimes fell still. And for the first time since the pumps had died, the ocean was only ocean again. The storm broke. The first rays of dawn cracked across the horizon, painting the rig in fractured gold. We stood dripping, shaking, each of us unsure if we'd survived or only delayed something inevitable. Torres touched my shoulder. "What did you do?" I had no answer, not one that made sense outside the crawl spaces of my skull. I had given it a place to live, a prison, or maybe a home. Either way, the ocean had stopped answering for now. We limped down the deck as the evacuation finalized, lifeboats lowering into calmer swells. I turned once more to the silent manifold hatch, knowing something of me would never come back from behind it. And then, from the crane at the far end of the rig, a motor coughed alive, even though no one touched the controls. Its gears hummed, metal teeth catching, almost like breath between syllables. 3 soft notes rang out into the dawn. The same 3 I had first heard deep below when the ocean had begun to speak. Not silence, an answer.